Right. Let's talk about car buying mistakes. Common mistakes people do make when buying a car, when buying a used car, when searching, when looking. We do pre-purchase car inspections and we see all the time mistakes happening. You know, it's just the biggest mistake is consumers' ignorance about age of the vehicle, mileage of the vehicle, ignoring the vehicle is too old, more than 10 years, over 100,000 miles, 100,000 miles, you know, and looking basically for the cheapest deal. That's basically a complete ignorance, you know. Regards to used car, you can't buy the cheapest car, you can't buy the high mileage car, you can't buy the car more than 10 years, right? For a start, because most of the people who do look at these cars, we want reliable car. That's subconscious. That's subconscious sort of myth or the rule they have in their mind, right? Which is absolutely correct. What that's absolutely correct, right reason to follow. So therefore, if subconsciously you have on mind you want a reliable car and you want the car to last you, let's say 4 years without significant problems, so that means you shouldn't be looking on a 100,000 mile car and you shouldn't be looking car 10 years and older. You know, you have to exclude that from logical search and approach. Also, a consumer, you should have reasonable expectations about the used car. And again, what I mentioned before, high mileage, 10 years and older, you know, the reasonable expectation would be on an average consumer, you should understand cars falling in bits on 4th and 5th year. That's where the unreliability drops, right? You always have to make sure you have an appropriate extended warranty, you know, and consumer rights to the degree it's not warranty. Car have to meet satisfactory standards at the time of the purchase. Seller have to make sure it passes. You have to make sure you have inspected the car and it is of satisfactory quality, so you don't have disputes. If you tint your windows, paint your alloy wheels, right? You do some detailing and then the car breaks down and then you blame the seller, they sold you a shit car, right? You should understand that. So avoid that misconception about satisfactory, you need to check the car yourself to make sure it is satisfactory, right? And is free from faults. And these things you don't see, they are what inspector would see, they are rectified before the vehicle goes out. So therefore, like I said, within 6 months, maybe the car will break down, right? Maybe it will break down after the first month. Maybe it will break down after 14 days, but at least you know the car was in good condition, or satisfactory condition at the time of the purchase, right? So you don't have that dispute, they sold you a bad car. You know, it's your consumer's responsibility, because everyone forgets the factor. The consumer rights works really well with new goods and supplied new sort of services, right? But when you're buying a used car, there is unreliability factor and certain things can break down, right? Because I've been talking about this all the time. New cars break down, but they have manufacturer's warranty, you know? So, and when you do book legally under manufacturer's warranty, there can be certain occasions you will get a hire car or courtesy car from manufacturer, right? Not always, but you will. So as a consumer buying a second-hand car, you should have, like I said, reasonable expectations. It can break down. It's not anymore new car, right? Therefore, you need that appropriate extended warranty, right? And the breakdowns will always come with a big inconvenience, because chances are there will be a waiting list at your favorite garage, or to the garage it will be taken to at the time of the breakdown. You know, you will have to notify the seller the vehicle breakdown, so you can't just simply avoid the consumer rights where you would not notify the seller of the issue. You will spend money on repairs, right? And another big problem what consumer overlooks, they pay for the repairs, not notifying the used car seller of the problem. The repair workshop misdiagnoses the car, same fault comes back, right? And then you as a consumer, then you're only going to the seller saying, oh, the car broken down and now you want something. But technically, the garage you took it, there's a misdiagnosis factor. They have potentially misdiagnosed that car. You know, then it goes back, and let's make it even more complicated. That garage used extended warranty you purchased with that car, and they misdiagnosed some issues, right? And that extended warranty will not anymore cover the faults. And now the consumer goes back to the seller saying, oh, my car is broken down and they can't sort of fix it. But that's not anymore to do with the seller. You know, the repairer has misdiagnosed the car, or maybe they don't have the right skill to repair it, and consumers going into the blame cycle, because it's very, very common, you know, when the arguments happen, to blame somebody because the consumer, the owner or the keeper of the car, right, doesn't want to pay any money anymore. And now he's going to blame the seller. They sold them a poor vehicle. You know, where consumer should communicate those issues with the seller, because the seller might advise their own garage, which predominantly is a used car, as used goods. Sellers always have a right, after 30 days and within 6 months, right to rectify this vehicle once. You know, you have to give them a right to rectify. So regards to car repairs, again, the market is poor. There's a whole market is full with poor mechanics, right? Where it is crucial to get the vehicle to the right technician, right? To the right people who specialize in these vehicles. I'm not saying only main dealers, I'm talking about independent specialists in a particular area. Whether it's just AC, or whether it's just diagnostics, or whether it's just let's say Honda, or whether it's just Ford, you know, or whether there's a specific system on a vehicle where specific individuals specialize, right? It is crucial to get that vehicle to the right repairer at the first place, you know, to avoid misdiagnoses, used extended warranty repair where the warranty paid out, you know. I've seen situations where one garage, let's say, used the extended warranty on that vehicle twice. I went to examine the vehicle at used car seller who actually sold the car to the consumer, and they had a dispute. And when I looked at the problems, obviously the car haven't been even fixed, right? Obviously the car had a latent issue, what I have seen regards to overheating. So there is a highly likely degree of misdiagnosis from the repairer, you know, and the repairer obviously was VAT registered at that occasion, and they used that extended warranty. Unfortunately, fault haven't been rectified, right? So these are the biggest problems people never include in their sort of decisions. These issues happen, right? They're not common. I gave you specific examples of when the things do go wrong, and that's where the blame game starts. So it's important always, like I said, don't buy old cars, don't buy high mileage cars, right? The more people will have a right approach, logical approach, and logical understanding and expectations about used cars, in the long term, those cars will be much cheaper, right? But because people always fail because they desperate, right? They desperate, they want car tomorrow, you know, and I always say to the people who phone in for the advice, you're not gonna buy the car on the same day. Common mistake. Desperate, going looking, buying a car on the same day, don't check it, they're buying problems, right? It's guaranteed, right? Again, looking online, not specifically maybe viewing it or finding the best car from those 10, ignoring full service history. If it's a private, don't check car history, check, you know, and finding a quick online searches and go and buying a car on the same day, you know. Also, if the car is 10-year-old or 5-year-old, you need to physically look on, as on many cars, as the age of that vehicle, you know. If the vehicle is 5 years old, you need to look at 5 cars. If the car is 10-year-old, you will need to look at 10-year-old cars. I mean, on at least 10 cars, right? Because the older the car gets, the harder is to locate a good one, because it's hard enough to find a good 5-year-old car, where by the logic, by the approach to the used cars and understanding used car market and having a reasonable expectations, everyone around the world buying a used car, you should be aiming at least maximum on 5-year-old car. If it's a panel van, commercial vehicle, 2 to 1 years, right? Because it's almost impossible to find a very good vehicle as to the standard as a sort of good used car, right? It's almost impossible because all of them are abused. They are all business cars used for business, logistics, parcel deliveries. Just have a look on any Amazon van you see, you know? So because of the, if everyone would have a reasonable expectations about used cars, right? That reasonable expectation never been talked about in used car sales. None of the organizations have been educating the consumer for 120 years about reasonable expectation about used cars, because most of the people doesn't understand. Most people just want, oh, it's used car, buy cheap. It's cheap. I'm gonna buy it. I'm not gonna check it and buy it. Currently, these are reasonable expectations for the consumer. Cheap car, I buy it, 10 years, 150,000 miles, I buy it, you know, 15-year-old car, 20-year-old car, 100,000 miles, I buy it, right? This is reasonable expectation, or potentially maybe can be constituted as ignorance, right? A reasonable expectation for the consumer buying a used car would be max 5 years and with the expectation, everyone has the expectation, reliability will keep it for 4 years. So that vehicle will sensibly last you for 4 years. That means we'll make that car 9-year-old, right? You always have to keep that in mind. The older you're going to get a car and you want 4 years out of it, you know, it will make that car, let's say, if it's 10-year-old, this will make the car 14-year-old. And to factor that reasonability, you know, that reliability factor is the vehicle means have to have a full service history, timing belt change, you know, and it have to be in a satisfactory condition, used well and above an average car. You know, it has to be well and above condition than very average car, long-term rental, short-term rental sort of car. As an example, I'm talking about a lease car, which haven't been used for business purposes, you know, but it's been used for the genuine private keeper, which used that car. I mean, if you travel to the walk every day as an ordinary consumer and then sell the car, and you travel, let's say, 100 miles a day, technically that's used for business, right? It should be, you've been traveling to work and back. You use it as a commute, you know, so that means it is used, you know, very well, you know. So, and somebody who bought a car and uses, let's say, 3 times a week, because most of the time he commutes with the train or public transport, and then use the car, go to the gym or go to the shop, and then weekends going out, you know, that's completely different usage than what, say, all the average cars get used for, right? They're used driven daily, long distances. They're not a lifestyle car. They are used for particular business purpose, right? You have to include this factor in consideration how you look for the used cars, right? So I hope all this information helps, right? But these are the common misconceptions, and for people ignoring these the factors about what you should be understanding and taking about reasonable understanding about reasonable expectations about used cars. You should be taking them on board when searching a car. So once you will start taking these reasonable expectations on board, you will minimize your complaints later on, right? You will minimize your complaints to Citizen Advice Bureau and arguing with the seller, you know? Because for seller doesn't care, you know? For him, it's just a unit. He wants to sell the car. You, as a sensible consumer and having a sensible decision factor on mind, you should be taking that information and expectations about used car on board, right? I'm not talking about situations where seller misled you, misdescribed the car, or sold you literally a faulty car, right? It happens, but comparing with consumer inflicted issues where is unreasonable expectations or reasonable expectations are ignored, combined with misdescribed, missold cars, the majority is ignoring the misconception, ignoring the basic factors what I just explained, you know. Obviously, however, you have to research the used car seller, right? You have to look online on their reviews, right? You have to look on Google Street View on their premises. You have to have full main dealer service history, preferably, or at least full service history, both keys, right? Car service timing belt, you know. And if you go on the carexaminer.com website, we'll have an update what we expect is a good used car. You have to be free from oil leaks, free from coolant leaks, you know. The car has to be in a sensible condition to expect at least some sort of reliability, you know. So just all those little basics, you know, free from loads of corrosion, free from loads of surface corrosions, you know. If you want to find a sort of sensible car, you have to pay attention to like basics and and judging the vehicle by overall having a look on the side and leaks, you know. If you look and if you don't want to book inspection, you should be looking at that. And if something is not right, remember, there's a reasonable degree of deterioration or age-related factor, which not always have to be sort of explained, but because it's expected, right? Especially from cars like from Scotland, from up north, like all this area around Liverpool, Manchester, Bradford, Hull, you know, where the temperatures are, the winters, the winters are more severe than like in London, you know, compared to London area, you know, or some seaside towns where corrosion would be more, surface corrosion would be more applicable for that car because it's an environmental factor, you know. So that means it would not always be explained from the sellers. You know, it's just that you should factor these things where you're buying these cars from. Look on a number plate. Number plates has area codes where they've been registered. So if you do look and ask the seller where the vehicle, because they will know in a logbook from which area the vehicle comes from, you know. So you can ask these things. They will not tell you who owned the car, but you should be asking, and seller should know for what purpose previously the vehicle has been used, because they buying the car. They have legal liabilities to understand and provide that information. If you do ask, you know, was it ex-business car or ex-tax-ly, you know, or enterprise car, long-term, short-term rental, an ex-lease car. But the lease actually means same thing. Short-term, long-term rental is just the way you perceive those terminologies, right? Leases, you just keep it for a short period of time and then give the vehicle back. Same as short-term and long-term rental, you know. Technically, it is a lease, right? You just renting from somebody that car, you know. It's just a lease. It's a bit of like a finance, you know. If you're buying from you and you keep it for a bit, you leasing it from finance company, short-term, long-term basis, or you're renting it from Enterprise, you know, or Alphabet, you know, which are lease companies. They have also short-term, long-term, other side businesses, right? Or Sixt, right? Same thing. It's just they're giving you more flexible terms. They don't check your credit histories, you know. You pay more, but you can return it in it's a 28-day rolling period, right? Contract, you can return it any time, you know, basically. Or you only do a contract for a year, you know. That's the sort of difference, you know. One checks your credit history and issues the car for that term based on your creded history, and you pay sort of finance on it, right? Those are short terms where you got flexibility, much greater flexibility, you know. So seller have to know these things, and you can ask them, you know. And like I said, the number plate has area where they've been registered. You can ask where that last keeper used that car, in which area. you know, less as possible keepers, you know. If you will dig in more, will have this logical understanding about used car market. Everything is buy low, sell high, you know. Cars end of the lease, end of the terms of new cars, they're going back to auctions, or they're going back as a trade-ins in the main dealers. Main dealers will sell them or sell them in auctions, and from auctions, used car buyer, trade gets these cars back into the cycle of used car market and the new buying, you know. So every car is completely different. To buy a good car, you need to do, it's a full-time job, you know. I always say that it's a very, very difficult, challenging task, especially if you buy a car more than 5 years old, you know. But it's hard enough to find a good 5-year-old car, you know, because of the criteria: full main dealer service history, both keys, you know, because everyone wants very good bodywork, you know. But all the ex-lease cars and business cars, and even some taxis might be even better than some sort of disability car, right? So you need to look physically, you know, on scratches and then pictures. All of the supermarkets all trade most, especially supermarkets, because they sell in high number of cars, units a month. They are taken in a sort of photo booths. They all pictures are photoshopped. You can't see it, you know. Remember, everything in pictures always looks even much better than on real life, you know, unfortunately. So you need to see that car in real life, because you might have a lot of flat paint, you know, thousands of blemishes. This is I'm talking about when the cars are used daily by many drivers, whether they've been registered keepers or non-registered keepers on a short-term, long-term basis, you know. Everyone leaves a ding, a scratch, and then that accumulates, you know. So that's why it's important to view the vehicle in person, because it is a used car, you know. And like I said, business used cars will have always much wear, and if you don't want to do that, you're not going to see that in pictures, you know. You need to, like I said, if it's 5-year-old car, you need to look 5 years. It will not be the first car you've seen and you'll buy it, because most of the people look for the high specs, and then there's so many scratches and dings and dents, you know. What's the point, you know? So you need to infactor that to avoid disappointments, you know. So I hope this generalization helps, you know. Take care for now.